The first thing I want to do is to thank all of you for coming this morning to this meeting of the National Policy Forum, where we're discussing the agenda ahead, the challenges that our country faces, and what we, the Labour Party, can do both to unite our country and to move it forward. And my first duty is a very pleasant one. It is to thank Ian McCartney, who has chaired the Policy Forum for many years, who's been a member of the National Executive over 2 decades, who has served the party in every capacity, including as a member of the Cabinet, but from local organiser to branch secretary, constituency secretary, to minister in the government, and of course an outstanding MP. And I hope you will allow me to present on behalf of the Policy Forum for all the work that he's done, something that I know you like, the biography of Nelson Mandela. Thank you so much. Well done. Now, it's a great privilege to be here, and let me say it's also a privilege to be here with Harriet Harman, because nobody has done more in her time in Parliament to speak up for the needs of families, to speak up for childcare, to speak up for women's rights, to speak up for maternity and paternity leave, and now to speak up on all issues of equality for the Labour Party. And it's a great privilege that we've got Harriet Harman, our new Deputy Leader, with us this morning. Now, over these last few weeks, what we have tried to do as a new government, with new members of the government, and of course with a new agenda for the future, is to speak up for the whole of Britain. To speak up for all people in our country, and not just for some. To be inclusive, to learn from new ideas and from new people, to govern in the centre ground, and not only to govern in the centre ground, but to shape and enlarge the centre ground according to the progressive values that we hold. And I believe that we're showing the British people that we are a modern party that is not looking backwards but looking forwards. We're a party in the mainstream and not on the fringes. We're a government that is listening to the British people and not just speaking to ourselves. We are optimistic about the future of this country and not pessimistic. There is no weakness in our country that cannot be overcome by the strengths of the people of Britain. And there is no problem too big in our country that cannot be met by the greatness of the British people. And I do urge all people who hold our progressive views, people from progressive views in all areas of the country, to immoderate conservatives, to join us in our campaign to make Britain the country it can be. Because what we're talking about over these next few years is meeting the new challenges of our time. 10 years ago, as everybody knows, when we came into government, the challenges were economic stability, getting people back to work, investing in our public services, trying to tackle the poverty and inequality that had been created under the Conservative years. And today these challenges remain. But I think all of you know that there are other challenges ahead, even bigger challenges, challenges that we as a Labour government must meet on behalf of the whole of the people of Britain. There is the challenge of terrorism and security. And we saw only 2 weeks ago, almost a day after Jackie Smith became Home Secretary and a day after I took over, we had to meet a major terrorist challenge. And I think the way that Jackie dealt with it is something that we all want to congratulate her for, and I'm glad she's here with us today. And we will meet that terrorist and security challenge, and we will meet it not just militarily and by police and by intelligence, we will meet it also by winning the hearts and minds of the British people to separate those who are extremists from the mainstream majority of the British people in all faiths and in all communities. That is a new challenge, and we will meet that challenge. There is the challenge of climate change and the environment. In 1997, I don't think anybody understood just how major and just how significant the challenge of climate change was going to be. And now we see it almost everywhere we look. And now we know that just about everybody in the country wants to make their contribution to dealing with this problem of climate change. And we as a Labour government will show internationally and nationally over the next few months. And I want our party, as it prepares the way for the next general election manifesto, to show that we have the long-term answers to the problem of climate change. There is a problem of global economic competition. We thought in 1997 we were competing against Germany and France and the rest of Europe and America. We now know we're competing globally, with China and India and all the emerging market countries competing against us, forcing us to restructure our industries and services. And we know as a country we will have to meet the challenge of global economic change. And then we also have the issue that I think is central to the way the British people see the future for themselves. And that is the challenge of rising aspirations. 50 years ago, what we had to do was create a basic safety net for people, a national minimum through the welfare state. Now what people want, rightly so, is the services, health services, education, all the different social services. They want them, rightly so, tailored to your individual needs and to their individual needs. And they want services that they can draw on at the time they want, in the places they want, at a convenience for them that is necessary for them to be able to plan their lives. And so we have to change all the time to meet these rising aspirations of the British people. And then there is the yearning for strong communities. You know, everywhere I went when I was going around the country over these last few weeks and months, I saw people in communities trying to make better communities. And I saw people wanting to make stronger neighborhoods. And I saw parents, I saw neighbors, I saw community activists trying to respond to what we all know in the face of security and change and globalization is a yearning for stronger communities in this country. And I've said before that what all these challenges have in common is what we now as a Labour government and as a Labour Party have got to do. All these challenges cannot be met without involving and engaging the British people. You cannot meet the challenge of climate change without individuals themselves being persuaded to play a role in taking personal and social responsibility. You can't meet the challenge of terrorism, we know that now, without persuading people in the different communities of the country that they must stand up too against extremists who try to exploit grievances and try to drive people in to murderous activities. You cannot solve the problem of global economic competition unless we persuade people in our own communities, particularly young people, that they must upgrade their own skills and take some responsibility themselves for having the skills of the future that will enable them to have the best jobs and the best occupations and the best standards of living. So in every place we turn, we have got to build a constitution for this country and build a way of running our country that responds to the reality that we now know, this inescapable fact that you can't solve the problems that we face in a modern world without involving and engaging the people. And that's why new challenges require a new kind of politics. And that's why this new agenda for change and all these different things that we've got to do require us to involve people more in the decisions that affect their lives. And that's why we've made a theme of the last few weeks that we need constitutional change. And that's not just some dry, abstract thing happening from Westminster and Whitehall. Yes, it is the Prime Minister and the Cabinet giving up power to Parliament. Yes, it is also major changes in the way the British Constitution works at the centre. But it's also about us finding new ways of engaging people and involving them, not just listening and learning, but them participating in the decisions that affect their lives. And that's why we're talking about a community right of recall of public officials. That's why we're talking about communities able to take over control of their own assets. That's why we're talking about communities' right to petition for things that can and should be done. And that's why over the next few months, Hazel Blears and others will be asking people in all constituencies and communities of this country how we can build a constitution for the future that is not just reform at Westminster and Whitehall, but more and more people engaged in the decisions that affect their lives. And I believe for us as a Labour movement, because we know that we are built on the idea that ordinary people should shape the decisions that affect their lives, this new constitutional agenda, this agenda for involving and engaging people is an exciting time for us to show that the principles that we believe are important, that there should be power in the hands of working people in our communities, that these can come alive for the 21st century. And then we must meet the rising aspirations of British people over these next few months and years. And one of the things that we have been doing over these last few weeks is showing people that whether it be in housing policy or education policy, or whether it be in the National Health Service, or in the way we run youth services, or what we are going to do to improve the environment, that we are on the side of the concerns and rising aspirations of British people for better services and for services to be more tailored to their needs. If you take one of the first announcements that I thought it was right to make as a government. Young people going to college and university. We know that our philosophy is that every young person should have the opportunity to study as far as their talents can take them. And we know that there should be nothing that debars people from taking up that opportunity and making the most of it, no matter how poor or how low income the background is. And that's why one of the first announcements was made by John Denham in the House of Commons 2 Thursdays ago, when he said that for the first time under the new system, 2/3 of students will now have grants. He also said that we'd create far more flexible systems of repayment for tuition fees. And he also said that where families were facing difficult decisions, for example, once you'd finished at college or university, you wanted to buy your first house, or once you'd finished at college or university, you were starting a family, we would make it possible for people to take a holiday up to 5 years from repaying the tuition fees. Now, it's right, in my view, that the cost of higher education should be shared between the parent and the student, who will earn a lot more as a result of the degree, and the government. But it's right also that we remove every barrier which makes it difficult for people to make the choices to go to college or university. So this new system of student grants going to 2/3, the holidays so that for 5 years, in making difficult decisions during your working life, you can suspend your payment of fees, far more flexible systems of repayment. And then a new thing. If you're on an education maintenance allowance and you're 16 years old, we can say to you, if you keep studying, if you do well at school, if you then get to college or university, we will continue the support we're giving in an educational maintenance allowance, not for 2 years, but for 5 years. And that is an incentive for people from lower income backgrounds to think very seriously about the opportunities available for college or university. So here we are, one of the first decisions we are making to put more opportunity in the hands of people who previously have been denied opportunity in the past. And if you were to sum up the philosophy of what we're trying to do, it is this: wherever there are opportunities denied to people, wherever there are aspirations that are unrealized, wherever there is potential that is unfulfilled, wherever we can as a government do something about that, we must be on the side of people who need opportunity, who have potential, who have aspirations, and who it is our duty to support. And then take schools. In the last few days, we made decisions also about how we can improve our schools. So at the age of 5 or 6, you know when a young child is falling behind. You know when they're failing to catch up with other kids in reading and in numeracy. You know if you leave it too late to the age of 10 or 11, then that child will have fallen behind for years and it may be impossible for them to catch up. So now, as a result of what we are announcing, every child who's in difficulty at the age of 5 or 6, every child who's finding it difficult to count through numeracy or to read through the literacy program will get special tuition so that they will not fall behind. And it's our dream that not just 80% of young children at the age of 11, but 100% of young children at 10 and 11 are able to read and to write, and we are putting additional resources to make that possible. And in every area of schooling, if you take the barriers to opportunity that exist at the moment, sometimes the absence of a Sure Start centre in your constituency, sometimes the standard of nursery education not high enough, sometimes not enough teachers in particular subjects in your schools, sometimes not enough emphasis on some aspects of the curriculum where people can benefit from it, sometimes not enough extended schooling, sometimes not enough encouragement in the vocational subjects as well as the academic subjects at 14 or 16. Our job as a government now is to say where there are barriers to opportunity and success for any child in this country, it is our duty to act and to intervene on their behalf. And this is a government that is in the service of opportunity on behalf of all people and not just some in our country. And then take the issue of housing. And we all know the problems of housing. Because when I went around the country over the last few weeks, I saw what I'd already seen a few months ago during the previous general election campaign. Young couples wanting to buy their first home, unable to do so. People living in rented accommodation in overcrowded conditions, sometimes in private rented accommodation, waiting to see if there is social housing available for them. Young children particularly suffering because of substandard accommodation. And we know there is a housing problem in our country that has got to be dealt with. In the 1920s and 30s, a Labour government made up its mind to build millions of houses in our country. In the 1940s and 50s, it was decided because of the absence of sufficient accommodation, we had to build more houses. Now, again, we are going to have to decide as a nation and win the argument with people who do not want that sort of development, that we have to build sufficient homes so that young families, people who are denied proper accommodation, people who want single accommodation and they cannot get it at the moment, people who are denied the chance to get on the housing ladder can get the chance to do so. And that's why in the next few days, Yvette Cooper, the Housing Minister, will announce that we will put more money, not just into making it possible for people to buy the first house, but into rented accommodation, to give a bigger role for local authorities than they've had before, to give a bigger role for housing associations so that we can meet the demand that exists not only for houses to buy, but houses to rent in our society. And I believe that if we are a party and a government and a society that is genuinely in favour of opportunity, not just for some, but for all, we have got to bring housing, rented or to buy, within the reach of people who today are denied the chance to have it. And then for our government, the next and perhaps the most immediate priority, the National Health Service. Because we are the party that created the National Health Service when others opposed it. We are the party that made a decision in the few years ago that we would invest substantially more funds in the National Health Service, and we've doubled expenditure on the National Health Service in the last 10 years. And we have now made a decision with the review that will be conducted by Lord Darzi, who is one of the most prominent medical practitioners in our country, a great cancer specialist, who has agreed to join the government, join the Labour Party, take the Labour whip in the House of Lords, and he is now reviewing aspects of the National Health Service to bring it up to date for the people of this country. We will renew the National Health Service for the people of this country. And what we have detected are really three issues that we've got to deal with. First is, the health service has got to be closer to people and accessible when they need it. So whether it be GPs and opening hours, or whether it be access to NHS Direct, or to the walk-in centres, or to the treatment centres that exist in local areas, or whether it be also electronic prescriptions that can be transmitted from the GP to the pharmacy without you having to queue at the GP, all these things that can make the health service work for you as individuals, we are now going to look at so that people can have and be able to say, the NHS is there for me when I need it. And then take the hospitals. We know what people are worried about. People know that the standard of cure and the standard of medical surgery and the standard of technology is high, but people also want the personal care for themselves and for their families. And so they're worried about MRSA. We know that. They're worried about the time that doctors and nurses have had to give to them as patients to give them the personal advice they need. They're worried about aftercare. And all these aspects of care in our hospitals, which Lord Darzi is now going to look at during the course of the review, these are things that we, the Labour Party, on the side of opportunity for all the people of this country, have got to be concerned about and got to act upon in the next few months. And then there is a question of how we cure the diseases that exist. And I want Britain to lead the world in finding cures for breast cancer, for all the other cancers, for some of the major ailments where we know we have now medical information and we need the resources to be able to work out the treatments and the drugs and the modern cures for the future. And that's why you'll see in the next few months that we're not just rebuilding the National Health Service for the next stage of its life, but also we're making sure that we lead the world and pioneer some of the modern cures for the great diseases that remain to be cured in our society. And this is us on the side of people, on the side of opportunity. But I tell you this, in contrast to the other parties, and I've been reading some of their policies and some of the threats to the National Health Service involved in that, the National Health Service under a Labour government will always be free to people when they need it, based on need and not ability to pay, and we will retain and renew these principles for the modern era for the National Health Service in our country. And I want us to break new ground in new areas as well. When we came into government in 1997, and thanks to Harriet and many other people who fought for this, we said that the services for the under fives was something that had been underdeveloped over the years of the welfare state. And we rightly said that for 50 years the welfare state had said to mothers particularly, We give you maternity services, you can vaccinate your child, and then bring your child to school at 5. And we did not do enough to recognize that for the earliest years of a child's life, and particularly those years when the child is developing very fast, that you need to put the resources in particularly to those children that are in danger of falling behind. And that's why over the last 10 years, and I think people will remember in history Tony Blair's great achievement that we invested in the under 5s in a way that no government had ever done before. And now we have nursery education at 3, we have the Sure Start centres, and there's going to be 3,500 in the constituencies of our country. We have maternity pay and paternity pay, as I said a few minutes ago, and we're improving every year the services available to both mothers and fathers and to the youngest children in our country. These were the Cinderella services of the welfare state for 50 years. But there is another area where we've got to act as well. And I've seen it everywhere I've gone when I've been touring the country and meeting people in different constituencies and communities. And that's youth services, services for young people. And you know, when you meet a group of pensioners, they will often say antisocial behavior is the real problem. And then when you meet a group of young people, they will say the lack of facilities means we're on the streets because we've got nothing to do. And then, as we did on one occasion, we brought pensioners and young people together, and they both agreed that yes, antisocial behavior was a huge problem, but yes, we also, and everybody agreed this, had a responsibility that there be better facilities for young people in every constituency of the country. So in a few days' time, for the first time, we will publish a 10-year strategy for dealing with young people's services. And it will be a 10-year strategy based not on what I think or what other older people think, but on listening to young people about what they want to happen. And yes, it will contain a commitment to more resources for these services. And yes, we have found a way of funding these services through the unclaimed assets of the big financial institutions, which are now going to be used to improve youth services in our country. And then we will have youth budgets for different areas of the country, young people making up their mind about how these services are financed themselves and which services they want to finance. And I believe that one of the great achievements of the next few years in every constituency of the country, whether it be midnight football or midnight basketball for young people, whether it be them running their own drama theatre or even their television and radio stations, whether it be building new facilities that are of use to them but decided by them, I think one of our great achievements will be to deal with what I believe is still a great weakness in our society, that we have not made the facilities available in the way that we should have for teenagers in Britain for the years to come. So if you take all the policies that we've got to think about ahead, I'm giving you a few illustrations of what we have tried to do in the first few days of this new administration. And whether it be John Denham at the universities, Ed Balls at the schools, Yvette Cooper on housing, whether it be what Hilary Benn doing on the environment, what Peter Haines is about to announce on jobs, whether it be what we are doing in every area where his or Blair's on communities, we are trying to make it very clear to people it is the concerns of people in this country that we are responding to. It is the rising aspirations of British people that must be met by new and better opportunities. That our task as a government is not to talk to ourselves. Our task as a government is not to listen just to a few people. Our task as a government is to involve and engage the whole community of this country so that we can shape the Britain that we have the potential to make it the greatest society in the world. And if you looked to only a few days from now, we will be announcing a reform in the New Deal as well. Because in 1997, our greatest challenge was to get young people back to work and get the long-term unemployed into jobs. And we cut youth employment by 70%, and we cut long-term unemployment by even more. And as a result, and I think it's one of the great achievements of the labour movement, the trades unions and employers and the government working together, there are 2.5 million more people in work now than in 1997. If anybody had said to you in 1997, could you create 500,000 jobs or 1 million jobs, people wouldn't have believed you. But just think, in 10 years, we've created 2.5 million more jobs for the British people. But there are still many people without opportunity. There are still many young people who've fallen through the net. There are still many single parents who want to work but know that they need training and they need the childcare and they need the support to do so. There are still too many people on incapacity benefit who want to use their capacities but have not been given the chance to do so. So the next stage is for us to make sure that the facilities and amenities of the New Deal are available to young people, to people who are single parents, to people who have disabilities, to all those people who are inactive, who for some reason or another have not been given the opportunities that we want them to have over these last few years. And what will be new about the next stage of the New Deal is that we have signed up large numbers of employers who now tell us that they will hire those people who we want most of all to find jobs for. And for British workers and British people who are inactive at the moment, there will be jobs available in the retail sector, in the financial services, in construction, in all the different range, hospitality, just like here in this hotel, hospitality jobs. And because there are thousands of jobs being created every year, and there are 600,000 vacancies in the economy, our task is to match those people who want jobs and want job opportunities to the vacancies and the jobs that are available. And I believe that this next and exciting stage of the New Deal is completing our promise to the British people that there will be opportunity for all. So as you look ahead in this policy forum to what are the challenges that face us, I haven't talked about the environment this morning, but the environment we must find and will find not only the policies that we've announced for the future working to make sure that we have a safer and more secure environment, but also we will lead the debate right across the world, a new World Bank for environment as well as for development, new treaties with other countries so that we cooperate on a sustainable environment, and building, of course, a post-Kyoto agreement for the future. But this is our chance at this policy forum to begin to shape the politics of the future. And I just say one thing about the party itself, because just as we're renewing the country, it's time also to renew the party. It's time also for us to prepare for the next stage of our development. It's time also for us to recognize that if we are going to be the best servant of the British people, then we ourselves need to involve and engage more people in each of our communities, both in association with the Labour Party as part of a network that we are part of, and as members of the Labour Party too. And that's why I'm suggesting that we make two major reforms in our party. The first is that we build the Policy Forum network from the grassroots upwards. And we offer members of the party at a local level the chance to engage in the policy decisions that will eventually lead to our programme and manifesto. And that we link up with community groups and other organisations in our own constituencies and in our own areas and make sure that they feel involved in the discussions that are going to lead to the programme and manifesto for the future. And the second thing then we need to do is to make it possible for people to vote at the end of that process, the whole party membership, on the programme that we recommend and we create. And I want us to move away from a situation where every year we seem to have a battle at the party conference over this resolution or that. Let us find a way when we discuss the policies, put them through the policy forum machinery, let the membership involve themselves, let people who've got difficulties with some of the policies discuss them out with us in the policy forum and elsewhere, and let us have a party that, first of all, is in contact with every area of our communities, just as the original founding members of the Labour Party wanted to achieve, and let us have a policy-making process which leads from the involvement of the individual member at the grassroots to start with, to eventually deciding the programme by a vote of the party membership. Now, the great challenges for us are all ahead. Environment, meeting the terrorist challenge and security, meeting global economic competition, and as I've concentrated on today, building stronger communities by involving people in them and meeting the rising aspirations of the British people. But I just close with one other challenge, and it's one that I'll be talking about in the next few weeks as well. We are the first generation in history that can actually say that if we do things properly, every child in the world will be able to go to school. There are 80 million children who yesterday, in all parts of the world, did not go to school because there was no schools for them to go to. And it is a standing scandal that something that is so easy to do, to build a school, to make it possible for teachers to teach, to provide books, to provide equipment, that for 80 million of some of the weakest and frailest people in the world, we are denying them that opportunity at the moment. And I want us over the next 2 years to lead a worldwide campaign that says that this Millennium Development Goal, that every child should have the chance of schooling, every girl and every boy, free of illiteracy for the first time in the history of the world. And I want us, the Labour Party, with contacts in every continent of the world, to lead that campaign. And I want us to do a second thing also. I want us to lead the campaign also to eradicate some of the terrible diseases of the world. It is outrageous in the modern world, and it is a shame on all of us when you think about it, that we have the science and the technology, the medicine and the cures to stop and eradicate polio, tuberculosis, diphtheria, and soon malaria. And we have the ability to do that, and yet there are millions of people dying, 30,000 children every day, from diseases that are avoidable and diseases that we know we can cure. And so I want us also from here in Britain, in a very practical way, to lead the world and to get other countries in the world joining us in not just a campaign, but in a practical program that one by one will eliminate these diseases by building healthcare systems that can deliver the treatments and the drugs and the vaccinations, by making it possible for countries where people are being buried today because there are diseases that are avoidable that we are not curing. We can help these countries. Now, two aims that will help us meet the Millennium Development Goals. Every child the chance of schooling. The dreaded diseases of the world eliminated because the medicine is there. What is lacking is the political will. Now, I know what you are thinking as individuals. If you could save one life that was at risk, one death that was avoidable, you could help avoid, you would do it as an individual. And that is what all of us as human beings would want to do. But just think, we are talking about millions of people dying unnecessarily from avoidable diseases that in any other century we were not able to cure, but in this century we are now able to cure. And so we, who are members of this political party, must find a way of linking up with people in all continents of the world to end these diseases that are avoidable and to end suffering, which is so unnecessary. Now, when people say that it's an impossible dream to meet all these Millennium Development Goals, and when people say to us, you know, you're just dreamers to think that you can do something as big as that, then just remember, as a Labour movement, 200 years ago, it was British workers that led the battle that for the first time ended the slave trade in one country in the world and then ended it throughout the world. And just think 150 years ago, it was British trades unionists who started to say that every child should have the right to schooling in our country and that children shouldn't be put to work or go up chimneys or be forced into labour at the ages of 5, 6 or 7, but should be given the chance of schooling. And that dream that people said was unrealisable and it was uneconomic to do it and it'd never work, we succeeded. And then just think 60 years ago, because we'll be celebrating the anniversary of the Health Service next year, 60 years old. People said, and the Tories said it, it was impossible to have healthcare that was free. That would be commercially suicide. It would never work. You could never make it happen. People would not use it properly. And we persuaded people, and the British people now believe that the only kind of health service that works is one where there is an insurance policy where healthcare is free to all. And so all these unrealizable dreams of centuries ago were realized as a result of the efforts of our party and our movement and the British people. And so in the next few years, in this generation, in our time, we can make history too. We can not only be the first country to lead the world in ensuring that every child in our country, and that's what all the changes we're bringing about are about, realizes the potential to the full. We can lead the world also in making sure that every child in the world has a chance of primary schooling. We can lead the world in eradicating some of the worst diseases ever. This is a task for our party. I have no doubt that we can win the support of the British people to do it. It is now our job to prepare ourselves and this party so that we can win another election to implement these values for modern times. I believe we can win the British people, but I believe we can only do it by working together. All of us together. Let's do it. Thanks very much.